The price is almost within its grasp. It has almost wiped out the Tamil Tigers from the areas that they controlled. In fact, there's no need for us to fire on civilians. In fact, we need to get the civilians onto our side. It's the Tamil Tigers who herded the civilians, a large number of them, into this enclave in which they're surrounded now. There, the civilians are being used as a human shield. You know that this situation exists elsewhere in the world, where civilians are paying the price for the ambitions of a small group. In the northeastern of Sri Lanka, that is exactly what is happening. There are thousands of civilians who are held against their will in this enclave by the Tamil Tigers as a shield against the government advance. In fact, over the last few days, over 35,000 of these civilians have escaped. They have run through the Tiger lines and come over to the government side. In fact, in the process, many of them have been shot at by the Tamil Tigers. I think it's very important to remember that today the government is embarked on a process of reconciliation. It is not by scratching the old scab or regurgitating the old wound that regurgitating the old pain that we can heal our wounds. We have to heal our wounds. As a people, we have to get back together. And the government is determined to follow a policy of reconciliation and rehabilitation.
How can you argue, though, Mr. Secretary, that the government is concerned about, is interested in, and is engaging a process of reconciliation when the Civil War is still ongoing as we speak, 25 years later?
War, as I must remind you, is against the Tamil Tigers, a terrorist group. And they have been asked repeatedly, not only by the government of Sri Lanka, but by the United States, by the European Union, Japan and Norway, India, and many other countries, Australia, to lay down their weapons and rejoin the democratic mainstream. Sri Lanka is a democratic country. We have regular elections. We elect governments and throw them out on a regular basis. The Tamil Tigers have held sway over that small area for the last 25 years with no change. They have recruited children by the thousands. There are thousands of young children, as young as 14, carrying weapons in that area, forced to carry weapons. They pioneered the suicide bombers. The government is carrying a campaign against this group, not against the Tamil civilians. A huge number of measures have been put in place to make the Tamil civilians feel comfortable in the country. In fact, I believe that we have done more than many other countries in the world which have a minority.
You referenced in our conversation a moment ago, Mr. Secretary, my conversation earlier with Ravi Nesbitt, who is the bureau chief for the Associated Press in Colombo. You referenced him when you suggested that earlier this program we did in fact hear that the Tamil Tigers have been quarantined in a 30-square-mile area in the northeast part of the country. What you did not reference, that reporter also said, is that it is very difficult for reporters to get this story out. You heard me ask M.I.A. If, in fact, there is genocide going on, and you've already addressed that issue, but I asked her if there was genocide going on, why we are not hearing more about it around the world. Her response was the same as Mr. Nesman's, that the government won't let the media cover this story. True or false? And if true, why not?
There are two or three things here. We must get back to the issue of genocide. For genocide to occur, there are certain conditions to be satisfied. And I do not think anybody who's familiar with the concept of genocide believes that there is genocide going on. As I said, the vast majority, literally hundreds of thousands of Tamils, live in areas controlled by the government and not in the areas controlled by the Tamil Tigers. So we have to lay aside this entire allegation of genocide. Second, reporters into this area, allowing reporters into this area. The government regularly conducts reporters into areas close to the fighting. It does not allow anybody to go into the area where there is fighting continuing for the simple reason that it is not safe. You must really have a death wish to want to get into that 30 or 35 square kilometer area, because there is fighting going on, sometimes fierce fighting.
There's no way, as we saw with Iraq, for journalists to be even embedded with the government to get a chance to see what really is happening? So there's no way for journalists to know the truth about what's happening there? I mean, wouldn't the government even benefit if if what you're saying is true, that story could be told?
In fact, a week ago, a group of journalists from the BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, and Reuters and others were taken up by the government. They were conducted around the area. In fact, this will continue to happen. Journalists will be taken up and given access to the front areas. But as I said, we do not encourage anybody to wander around freely in the area where fighting is going on, because it is not safe. And as a government, we do have an obligation to ensure that guests in the country do not come to any harm.
Is there no solution here? Is the question of an independent state out of the question?
Well, can you imagine an independent state being carved out of the 35 square mile area that which Tamil Tigers control and which they're likely to lose over the next few days or weeks? I think this is not what the majority of Tamils want either. If you were to take the views of the majority of the Tamils, they will say they would rather be part of Sri Lanka rather than be part of this illusory Tamil elam. If you come to Colombo, you will see that the vast majority of the people living in Colombo are Tamils or Tamil speaking. 39% of Colombo, that's our capital, is Tamil. Another 20% is Muslim. So Colombo is a minority city. 59% of our citizens in Colombo are from the minorities, two major minorities. There are other minorities also. And here they go about their lives with no interference. They have their professions. Some of the leading professionals in Colombo are Tamils. Some of the leading business houses in Colombo are Tamil owned. Their children go to school here. They carry on with their lives without interference. It is not the same in the small area controlled by the Tamil Tigers. There was a report issued by UNICEF yesterday that thousands of children, some as young as 14, have been conscripted into fighting with the Tamil Tigers. This does not happen in government-controlled areas. Children go to school. They do not get dragged off to the front line in areas controlled by the government. Similarly, every family has been forced to contribute at least one child to the cause. You do not get that in the areas controlled by the government. My view is that, and I believe that this is shared widely, that most of the Tamils of this country would rather live under government control than under the control of the LTTE.
I have just 30 seconds left, right quick. When and how do you expect this civil war to end?
I wouldn't even categorize it as a civil war anymore. It is a bunch of terrorists who are carrying on an armed struggle, a terrorist struggle against an elected government, a democratically elected government. I hope that it will end soon so that the people of this country can get on with their lives, that normalcy can return. The people want peace, and I believe that they deserve to have peace in this country.
Dr. Kohona, Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, thank you for your time. I appreciate your insight.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.